I saw this light, and the light appeared to be coming toward me or me going toward it. I'm not really sure, but I was just fixated on that light. And as I got closer to the light, I realized that the light looked like millions upon millions of fragments of light. And they were all kind of like of one mind. They were kind of moving and swaying, and they were, you know, just if you've ever seen like a video of a school of fish, sardines or something like that, where they all move in unison, and then suddenly they change direction, and you see these beautiful different colors of light that comes off them as as it's refracting through the light. And so it kind of looked like that, only infinite. It just went on and on and on.
My guest today is David Bennett. David Bennett was once a brash young commercial diver and chief engineer of the research vessel Aloha. His harsh personal philosophy was you cut your swath through life to survive. But one night he was caught in a violent storm off the California coast where he drowned. While technically dead, he met beings of light, relived his life, and peeked into his future, all resulting in a complete paradigm shift for him. David, it is amazing to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. It's an honor.
Thank you, Tia. It's a privilege to be here. I really enjoy sharing my experience.
Well, thank you. And yes, my viewers are interested in near-death experiences, and you had a quite an interesting one where you actually drowned. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, this happened quite a while ago, but it still remains with me as fresh today as the day it happened. It was back in 1983. I was the chief engineer of a research vessel, like you said, and we were we were a few miles off the California coast. We had just evaluated a new remote operated submarine, an ROV, and we were trying to get back to the harbor, you know, before the storm overtook us. But the storm overtook us, and the harbor master refused the ship entry. But we had a whole contingent of crew on board that, and we had a design engineer that needed to get into LAX. So the captain and everybody decided to put one of our small rubber Zodiacs in the water and to transport him into the harbor that way, because we were a big ship and the harbor master didn't want our ship to bottom out, because there were 25 to 30 footers out there that day. So, but we're 2 miles offshore. It's hard for us to tell what the condition is at the harbor, entrance. But because back in those days, we didn't have quite as much technology as we have today. Um, you know, webcam, harbor cams and things like that. We didn't have that kind of stuff. So we were relying on the harbor master to tell us what we could or couldn't do. So the captain decided, yeah, we'll take these guys in, but because we were doing an evaluation of equipment, we didn't have our full crew on board. So the captain said, and the mate that we had wasn't familiar with the harbor, so the captain asked me to, go along, because I was third officer. I was the chief engineer, and I knew the harbor, so I agreed to go. But this night we actually went down to the bosun's locker, and we pulled out life vests and put life vests on most of the time, because we were doing commercial diving and underwater exploration. We spent a lot of time on the water, under the water. We never wore life vests. But this night we actually went down to the bosun's locker to put on a life vest, and they were, let me tell you, they were dirty. They were just, we had to beat the dirt out of them, because they've been in that locker for a long time. And they were the old fashioned Mae Wests. They look like a big giant puffy orange pillow, And so really they've been outlawed since, the Coast Guard doesn't allow them anymore. But anyway, so we took a bearing on the harbor, jumped in the Zodiac, and started making our way in. Well, you can imagine rough seas like that, 25, 30 foot. we would go up the top of a swell. We'd kind of take a bearing on the shore and the harbor buoy, and then we'd go down, ride the trough down and up to the top of the next swell and do the same thing over and over. But eventually we kind of lost track of where the harbor buoy was. We just couldn't keep track of it because it was bouncing up and down the same as we were. So we didn't realize it, but the storm had actually blown us almost a mile south of the harbor. And we had, after we got almost about a mile offshore, because we started out, we were 2 miles offshore, about a mile offshore, we, and it's a stormy night, so also visibility is pretty nasty. We hit a breaker zone, and we drove off of a 25-footer, and I mean, we just caught air, and we, and when we slammed down, I yelled at the mate because I was in the bow trying to, see where we were, and I yelled at the mate to turn us about and head us back out to sea because we're in a breaker zone. This is a bad place to be. Well, right about then, the next one came. It was right over us, came down on top of us, and it folded that Zodiac in half like a peanut butter sandwich. I was in the bow, so it catapulted me into the ocean. And now I'm trained as a commercial diver, so I'm not freaked out. And God bless, we put on life vests this night. And it's nighttime, so it's absolutely dark. The wave pushed me down into the ocean, and I was being tumbled and tossed like a rag doll. So I totally lost all orientation as to what was up and down, left or right. And so, being trained as a diver, I didn't panic. But what I did do is I had the awareness of not to try to swim because I could be swimming down instead of trying to swim up. So I was relying on the life vest to bring me up to the surface. And I just protected myself. I kind of just tucked into myself and tried to protect myself because again, I was just being trashed in the ocean with all these waves. Well, you can only hold your breath so long. As a commercial diver, I kind of knew I could hold my breath for maximum about 3 minutes. And trained as a commercial diver, we actually go through oxygen deprivation training where they teach us, to recognize the symptoms, the euphoria that comes when you start to be, your brain is starved from oxygen and stuff like that. I love your cat, by the way. She just got to get in the action.
She's got to be a part of it.
That's great. So anyway, we were, I was starting to feel, the euphoria and all that stuff, and I was thinking, boy, this is not good. I should be hitting the surface at some point here, but I keep getting pushed down, and so I just kept holding my breath, kept, trying to orient myself. I even tried blowing out a few bubbles to see, but that, everything was so turbulent you couldn't tell anything. And it was nighttime. There's no street lights out there, so it's pretty dark and black, And then eventually, the euphoria takes over and you try to breathe. And the minute I did, I popped out of my body. But I didn't pop out of my body and be in the ocean. I popped out of my body into this absolute darkness. And I was like, where the heck am I? There's no more roar of the ocean. There's no more, on the West Coast, this was in March, the water comes out of the north. It's pretty frigid. No longer cold, quiet, it's peaceful, it's calm. And I just come from this violence that probably the most violent thing I've ever experienced in my entire life, into this peacefulness. And so I was curious. Like, where are we? What's going on here? And this is way beyond my training. But it was kind of curious because it was very comfortable, but it also I really didn't feel alone, even though I was in absolute darkness, absolute emptiness. But it felt like that emptiness was more. There was something more to it, And then I saw this light, and the light appeared to be coming toward me or me going toward it. I'm not really sure, but I was just fixated on that light. And as I got closer to the light, I realized that the light looked like millions upon millions of fragments of light. And they were all kind of like of one mind. They were kind of moving and swaying, and they were, you know, just if you've ever seen like a video of a school of fish, sardines or something like that, where they all move in unison, and then suddenly they change direction, and you see these beautiful different colors of light that comes off them as as it's refracting through the light. And so it kind of looked like that, only infinite. It just went on and on and on. And as I got closer and closer, I started feeling these waves of just love. It was like somebody had wrapped me in this warm embrace of love. And it's hard to explain what that feels like, but I was in absolute awe of what I was experiencing. And then three fragments broke away and they came toward me. And as they came toward me, they were kind of radiating or emanating this feeling of welcome home. And I'll tell you, it's so hard to talk about that feeling of welcome home. And eventually, a dozen of these light beings uh, came and started welcoming me. And they felt familiar. To me, they felt like family. And so and I realized that because I tried to look at, myself, and I realized that I was becoming one of these fragments of light as well. And they were welcoming me home, and it was quite amazing. Um, a little bit of the backstory: I grew up as kind of um, my mom was a single mom when it wasn't really popular. And so she would kind of farm me out to families because she was trying to make a living. And so she would put me with these other families. And I would only see my mom maybe a couple times a month for a weekend here, a weekend there, type of thing. And the rest of the time I spent with these other families. And I wasn't treated so well in these with these other families because they didn't really have an interest in me. So I never really felt like I belonged to a family because I was placed from one to another to another. Um, and and so this feeling of welcome home and this group of light beings to me were a family that I didn't even know I had. And I felt so welcome and so, loved in this presence. So they communicated to me that we were going to go into the light. And we went deeper into the light where it seemed like we were in this giant ball, this giant sphere. And we started to relive my life. And in the NDE research, they call it a life review. But it's more than just a review. At least it was for me. What I experienced was the my life. I was reliving it, but not only from my perspective, but from everyone I'd ever interacted with from their perspective. It was like my consciousness fragmented into these multiple streams of consciousness, and I could experience all of that at the same time. Well, there is no time. And not only was I experiencing that, but my soul family was experiencing it with me at the same time. Well, the way in the intro there, you mentioned how I was a brash young man and I had that pretty severe philosophy of cutting my swath through life. The So some of the experiences that I had to experience and relive with my soul family, I was kind of ashamed that they actually were experiencing this the same way I was experiencing it. It was hard. It was kind of harsh. And so, but I also got to see where I would do things with loving intention that created like these ripples of, when we would do something, there was a reaction in the people. And so and I was experiencing it from their point of view as well. So I got to experience how this affected the negative and the positive. And it seemed like the positive had a greater response than the negative. And so it was incredibly humbling, incredibly humbling. And so but my soul family, they were there and they were supporting me, even though I was like, oh gosh, I wish they didn't have to see or experience this. But, but then we got to a point where we had gone beyond where I drowned. And we started experiencing, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I got to see my future, my potential future. And it was kind of interesting because everything in the life review was absolutely crystal clear. But once we crossed that threshold into future potential, it was like I was looking down a corridor. And so all of the events that I was experiencing in the center of the corridor were clear. But to the periphery, to the right, to the left, up, down, whichever, there is no direction there. Um, it was a little out of focus. But I had the impression that if I wanted to, I could go in that direction or I could go in that direction. But I would gently be pulled back to the center. And so I started going down this corridor, and it was a little disorienting because I didn't have a reference for it. But my soul family, they loved me. They supported me. They buoyed me up so that uh, I could traverse this corridor. Well, I got through a number of events, and then the light itself spoke to me, and it said, "This is not your time. You must return." Said it with the most loving parental voice you ever want to hear. And it was like all of those fragments of light in unison were speaking all at once. It was this real incredible resonance. And I said, no, no, I'm not going back. I got a family that loves me. I'm feeling loved like I've never felt before. I'm I know that body is just broken in the ocean. I have no desire to. To me it just the body just looked like something cold. I just didn't want to go there. And so I argued. I argued with what I perceived as God. And I thought I did a pretty good job. But anyway, um, the, the light spoke one more time. And this time it said, "You must return. You have a purpose." And that word purpose just kind of resonated through my being. And it was so simple and so efficient because when we're in the light, we have this. It's like we're connected to all the souls that ever were and all the souls that ever will be. So we have this expansive consciousness that beyond anything that we have available to us here in this physical form. So when I heard that word purpose, I understood it. And it was simple, it was efficient, and I immediately just came to acceptance. And with that acceptance, I found myself outside my body, no longer in the light, and I was observing my body in the ocean being tumbled and tossed. The three original light beings that came with me had accompanied me. They were with me, and we were watching. And I was, again, in awe of how is the enormity of me going to fit in there, in that little vessel, that physical body. And as I was pondering that, the another set of waves hit, and some of the wreckage of the Zodiac came close by, and the bow line actually wrapped itself around this arm and was tapping my lifeless chest. The bitter end was tapping my lifeless chest. And another set came, and suddenly there was some air left in one of the pontoons of the Zodiac. And so it popped up. And when it did, it cinched that line around my arm and it pulled me up to the surface. And I went up with it. Me and my soul family, we just followed it up. We were we were observers in this little scenario. And then my body,
if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. Like,
yeah, really?
what are the chances that something like that is going to happen?
Yeah. Well, and it even became a little more miraculous because the waves, I got tangled up in the wreckage and the waves actually pounded me up against it. And that's what pushed some salt water out of my lungs. And that's when my soul family gave me a gentle push and I came back into my body and took a breath of air. It was tough. We were still a mile offshore. Um, my the mates that were with me in this accident were stayed on station. They didn't just swim off. They all tried to find each other and they realized that I was missing and they were looking for me. They were calling my name out. And I couldn't reply because when you breathe in salt water, I could only make like squeaks and squawks at first till I coughed up everything. And even then it was tough. So, but they found me. And so we all swam together and then they decided, okay, it's time to swim into shore through the waves and the breakers and all of that. And we had a mile to swim through those conditions. And I had just died and come back to life. And so I hung on to the wreckage, and we all kind of did. And I was just kind of scissor kicking because this arm it was dislocated and my thumb was dislocated and I really couldn't do anything with it. When that line yanked me up to the surface, it dislocated my arm and thumb. So that was useless. So I just hung on and was scissor kicking, to try to swim in. And, but I couldn't stay on the surface. I just couldn't stay on the surface. So, but when we come back, it's like we feel like we're half here and half there and still connected to that expansive consciousness. So I instinctively knew that there was something wrong with my life vest. There was just something wrong with this thing because I kept getting pulled under and I couldn't stay on the surface as much as I tried. I mean, I kicked off my steel-toed boots. I was doing everything I could to stay up. But I opened up my life vest and I could see that the lining had dry rotted. It had been in that locker for so long, and the fiber filling had become saturated with salt water, and it was actually what was dragging me down instead of lifting me up. So I just chucked it off and it disappeared. And then I could stay up on the surface and help, try to swim into shore and everything. It's kind of funny though, when you come back, I was thinking when I was in the light, purpose was so clear, so efficient. But when you come back into this body and come back and have to work with our minds, it started to just disappear. It was like sand in your hands. It was just slowly and I was like, purpose. What was that purpose? God, and so I was the whole way in, to me, I vaguely remember the swim in because I was so focused on what was that purpose, and until we got into shore and everything. And then it was a matter of, first aid for everybody and trying to get everybody back.
While you were having a life review, you said you came to a point in time where you were actively drowning and then you went beyond that into your future. So do you feel then everything is already written in the stars and we're just following, something that's laid out for us?
That's a great question because I do believe that we pre-plan and we agree to um, parts of our life, but I also believe that we have free will. And so I believe that, yeah, what was in the center, that's the path that I agreed to, that I would complete or try to achieve. Um, but I also believe we have free will. I believe that we can sit down in our path if we choose to and not go anywhere. But I think, but it's kind of interesting the way the universe works. The universe is going to nudge us along. It's going to keep presenting what we need to keep moving forward. But we can also veer to the right, veer to the left. I mean, but I really believe the universe will slowly nudge us back, to our core path. But that free will allows us to get there on our terms.
And you said that you felt like when you came back, you were half there, half here, 1 foot there, 1 foot here. Do you still feel that way?
You know, the intense part of that, that I felt like I was half here, half there. That lasted for about 3 days. But there were other gifts that came along with it that I was unprepared for, because you got to remember, I was an engineer. I pretty much saw things as black and white. My mom was an atheist, and I was thrown in with all these different families when I was a kid, and they all had different beliefs, and I didn't see where any of them were being benefited by their belief system. So I pretty much didn't have a religion or a belief system, other than when I was living in Arizona as a youth. So I had some Native American grandmothers that showed me a natural way and vision questing and things like that, that really, that kind of resonated with me. But and I got to see that in the life review, how it really, that really, I don't know, it was something that I was attracted to, especially after the fact. But I didn't, the feeling half here, half there, like I said, that kind of waned away slowly. But then when I came back, I started seeing auras, people's auras, especially when I looked into their eyes. I could see their light. I could see their fragment of light. And it was really disconcerting because I was an engineer, and it was like suddenly, and we were in Southern California, and palm trees, I'll tell you, boy, palm trees look amazing when you're looking at their aura. And so I was like, what the heck is going on? And it was freaking me out. And I wanted my old life back. It was like, I don't know what this is. I really something must have happened when I drowned, that, I must have got hit in the head or something. I was really doubtful as to what all this is. And then not only that, but I started receiving information, like, so that awareness, that like feeling half here, half there, would come in little downloads. Okay, I'd get information, and that continued after, long afterwards. But the rest of it scared the what out of me. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't have any, you know I didn't have a faith or anything to kind of rely on to help me. I didn't know anybody else who had died and talked to God or argued with God. And so it scared me. It really scared me. And so I really, really wanted my old life back. And so I tried to push it away. It was like, okay, but the life review was something that it was like, it was so compelling that I took from it three things. I called it acceptance, tolerance, and truth, because suddenly I could accept, I saw who I really was. I saw the core of my being, of who I was. And yeah, I had a lot of work to do on myself because I was not the nicest guy. So I recognized that, and I could accept that this is who I am right here, right now, but I can work on myself. So I found acceptance. Tolerance was, I really didn't have tolerance for other people. I didn't care what other people thought. Whatever I was going to go for, I would achieve through my own skills, and if somebody got in my way, God help them, because I was going to go through them or around them, or somehow I'd get past them. Um, so I really didn't have tolerance. That was a foreign concept that suddenly I understood, because in that life review, I got to see that we have so many different people that cross our paths, and we don't necessarily always agree with their life choices, but they're their life choices. I make my choices and they make their choices. And so I suddenly had tolerance that they're trying to live their life the best that they know how, just like I'm trying to do the same thing. So I had acceptance of myself, tolerance of others, and the situations that I found myself in, because I may not like where I am right now, but I had tolerance to realize that I can work to get out of this situation, or to make this situation better, more empowering, more helpful. And then the last one, truth. This was a little harder for my engineer brain to wrap around, because I'd always seeing things as black and white, what I'd learned in school, what I'd experienced in life. That was truth, right? But then I realized that there's another truth. There's a truth that resonates within our heart. And when we come across it, we recognize it. Our being recognizes it. But unfortunately, in society, we've kind of tamped in that instinctive knowing and instinctive truth. We've kind of like don't pay so much attention to it. Sometimes we do, but we don't even realize that we are. So I suddenly knew that there was a truth that resonated within my heart. And when I felt that, then I would pay attention to it. So acceptance, tolerance, and truth, that's what I took from the first near-death experience. And that's what I became kind of like my mantra, my guiding star, my ideal, okay, of where I wanted to go. But the rest of it, I didn't want to face the fact that I had gone into the light, that I had drowned, that I taught the soul family, and the life review. All of that was just it was too much for my engineer brain to deal with. So I just tried to forget it. But these near-death experiences really don't let you forget it. They stay with you. They stay with you. But
Yeah, I think that they become like part of who you are.
they are because you face a new worldview that you didn't even know existed, and suddenly, but then it makes you feel like you're living in this dualistic world because you've had the experience, but you're also this physical life. And how can I bring the two? How can I weave the two together? And that becomes a journey for many experiencers. Like for me, I started looking for books that had anything that described love. I wanted to know what this love was. And I became this voracious seeker looking for understanding about this love because wasn't love with conditions. It was pure. It was this immense, and everything was connected to this love. So um, that became kind of a journey that started changing who I really was. So I think my acceptance, tolerance, and truth, and seeking love in life really, really started to affect me more than I thought. I thought I was staying the same, but I had a second experience 11 years later, and and that's when in that one I got to see those 11 years how much I had changed because of the experience.
That is really fascinating how you got to compare from the other side your life, your life path, I guess, and your life choices. Yeah, tell us about that one as well.
Well, that one it wasn't so much where I actually died. It was more of a near death like experience. Is one of the terms that they like to call it. Um, but it was more. I was with a group. I quit my life at sea because I had this urge, this drive to be of service, and it just and that's a common thing for a lot of experiencers that I've talked to over the years that this feeling that I need to contribute and give back. And so I quit my life at sea. I started working in healthcare. And while I was there, I connected with this spiritual group. And within the spiritual group, there were some near-death experiencers. Lucky me. And so I got to hear their story. Now I wasn't quite ready to share my experience because I had gotten really good at hiding. Because again, it had scared me. I thought I was going nuts at first. And so I kind of like I tried to, you know, but I had all this intuitive knowing that suddenly I was part of my life and I would test it like a good engineer and where did that come from? It's not something I learned in a book. It's not something that that I experienced in life. But how do I know this? So I would kind of test this knowledge that would come to me. And I found out it was veridical, it was real. It was something that was, could be acted upon. So eventually, after 11 years, until I had the second experience, I began to rely on it. And so I kind of thought I had this whole experience under control. But then I had the second experience where I was with a spiritual group. We were in Arizona. We were actually in, I used to live in Cottonwood, Arizona, and we were in the Verde Valley, but we were in Sedona. And I used to tromp those canyons in my youth. So I was really in my happy place. And the leader of the spiritual group wanted to do meditation. So we went to Bell Rock and we were sitting there. And I knew some spots on Bell Rock that I used to like to go hang out when I was a kid and just look out across the valley. So I went up there. I thought, well, the grandmothers had taught me how to go into my sacred space. I'll use that. I'll go into my sacred space. And as I did that, the light spoke to me and it told me to return to the light. And so this is what started the second experience was I was suddenly back in the void, in that darkness, seeing my soul family, going through the entire life review. Only this time I had those additional 11 years that I had lived. And so, and this time I paid a little more attention because I had grown and I had matured more into this experience. And so I was, like, what is this interaction with everybody about and all that kind of stuff. So it really, really, the second experience kind of showed me that, I had I had taken acceptance, tolerance, and truth, and I had slowly adopted this knowing. But I came to understand that what I was hearing or what I was experiencing or the download, the information I was receiving were coming from this soul family. And so in the second one, I started to distinguish the dozen of beings that were with me as individuals and different voices, but I like to say different flavors because it's not just a voice. There's intention and there's all these other components to the information. And so in the second experience, I got to explore a little bit deeper. And so when that experience ended and I'm back in my body again, I was like, oh man, I really, really um I had retarded this integration of this experience because I hadn't faced up to the totality of it. And so and then after, meeting other experiencers who ended up becoming my mentors, I was able to actually start to integrate the experience into life where I was weaving the spiritual side of myself with that physical side. And I was able to kind of bring them together. And it really helped me because I had another challenge coming down the road that I had seen, but I didn't think it was going to come anytime soon, but it ended up coming a lot sooner. And that was stage 4 lung and bone cancer.
That must have been a shift in your paradigm when you found out that you had that.
Yeah, well, I had quit my life at sea and I had started working in healthcare in dialysis. And so I had gotten to see how healthcare worked. But what happened was I had stage 4 lung and bone cancer. It had eaten away 2.5 bones of my thoracic. It started in my lung, metastasized into my spine, and ate away 2.5 bones of my thoracic. And the spine couldn't hold the weight. I mean, the tumor couldn't hold the weight of my spine, and so my spine collapsed. And that's when it presented itself. And in the hospital, they did a bunch of tests, and they found I had lesions in my hip, my brain, my kidneys, and it was stage 4. They didn't believe I was going to survive it, so they were going to try to make me comfortable. But I had seen in the life review, I had seen where I was going to have cancer. I didn't know when, but I saw I was going to have it, and I also saw I was going to live beyond it. So when they said, no, we're going to, you probably got about 8 weeks, because it's in your bones, it's moving very rapidly, and you're going to, it won't be long. Your organs will start to shut down and and so we're going to make you as comfortable as possible. And so you need to make your peace. And I was like, no, if I can say no to God, I can say no to those doctors. And so I said, no, we're going to treat it. And because I was an assistant director within this hospital, I was able to pick my physician and my healthcare team. And they were a bit I can't say resistant because they were incredibly compassionate, but they really felt that I was just prolonging my suffering. That was their, and I could tell that that's, what they're, but I was able to pick some doctors that went along with what my wishes were because I wanted to treat it. And so we picked, some modalities to, to work on the cancer. But I also, spirit guided me to also um, use some holistic approaches to kind of balance out the 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 traditional healthcare. And so we did that. And within 6 months, guidance and spirit were kind of letting me know that things were improving. It's hard for me to tell because I had a collapsed spine and I was in a lot of pain. But they also helped me to develop this mindfulness of being able to go into the pain and to be able to kind of put it aside so that I didn't have to take the morphine and the Percocet that they had prescribed for me. I could just kind of put that aside and use mindfulness and intention to actually control the pain and to continue my conversations with spirit. Because after that second experience, I wasn't just receiving downloads anymore. I was actually having conversations with my soul family. And so it had, amped up my spiritual connection even more, which we all have available to us. It's just a matter of learning how to listen, and allowing ourselves to receive that information.
Do you think that was one of the gifts? You said you had come back with gifts, but do you think that was one of them, that you were more open now to the spiritual realm? And
Yeah, and yeah, very much so. Yeah, T, I think, you're onto it there that these experiences do open us up. And we don't have to die to have these experiences. I've met so many people, and I just call ourselves experiencers. There was actually no, Pew study back in 2004, 2014 that looked at American adults, and in the study they were looking at how many American adults have had some form of spiritually transformative type of experience, some kind of spiritual experience, not necessarily just near death experience, but any kind of spiritual experience. And they found that it was over 56 point something percent of U.S. American adults have had some sort of spiritual experience.
I believe it. And I think that there's been kind of a taboo over the years that you don't talk about those kinds of things. People are going to think that you're crazy.
Yeah.
And it's still happening. But when people like you share their experiences, it helps spread the word and people can understand better what happened to them. And it becomes more natural for them to share and to get it out, to speak about it. So that's why, gosh, I appreciate you coming on and sharing so much, because it not only helps me and my viewers, but it's going to get out to so many more people and help people that are grieving, that
Mm.
are facing death, that have had experiences they can't understand, and help them to feel more normal and accepted in our society, because our society is so closed off to true spirituality.
Yeah, Tia, that's why it's such a gift of what you're doing with this channel of yours. You're disseminating this information because I've been an advocate for experiencers now for almost 40 years. And so they to have a safe place where you can observe, you can learn, because when you first come back, you don't even have a language to describe because this is some otherworldly type of experience. And it's like, I need words to be able to describe it and bring it together. And so listening to other experiencers gives us that vocabulary, gives us that what we need in order to express our own experiences and things like that. And so the service of your channel allows them to realize I'm not crazy. I'm not nuts. The world may think that this is still some phenomena. It's still class in science. NDEs and spiritually transformative experiences are still considered phenomena. But to the experiencer, they're more real than this life. And so recognizing that and having channels that talk about it in a just an average way without and recognizing that these experiencers, they're not crazy. They're regular everyday people that have just happened to have this amazing experience that has altered the way they live their life.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a blessing to have people like you that come in to share. So thank
It's
you.
hard though. It's hard.
Yeah.
Like I said, for 11 years, I didn't share with anybody other than I shared it with my first wife, and that didn't go too well. So I decided, boy, I guess I really shouldn't share this experience. And so I really kept it quiet until after that second experience when I realized I'm not living my truth if I'm not integrating this experience. And so then that's when a clearer communication, I was able to you know receive better guidance to be able to move and follow my path, and be a part of life for real.
For real. Yeah, for real this time. I think it
Yeah.
changes your life and it helps you to live better. You have less fear. Some people have no fear at all of death or life and realize this is just an experience. Do you have any fear left over after your near death experience?
I'm not afraid to die. I know that how wonderful it is on the other side. But there's a caveat with that is I don't want to suffer. Okay. On my way out. I really would like a clean break, if you say, but, and also I recognize how precious our life is because my soul family were thoroughly involved and enjoyed and so happy to be able to experience my life. And that tells me that what we have here is precious. What we're, because I believe we all share a purpose. I believe we all share that journey to reconnect to our true nature, to connect with our higher consciousness and start living through that higher connection. I believe that's a shared purpose that all of humanity has. And so, uh, and I've had a number of little experiences that have kind of confirmed that. And so that's kind of been a part of my path, and part of my exploration in life. But we all have a journey, and it's just we need to be aware of that we all do have a spiritual side to us and a spiritual journey that can be a part of our everyday life.
I absolutely agree. And then you were talking about purpose, and when you were coming back, you felt like the purpose was like sand flowing through your fingers. You can hold on to it. You came back though, and you changed your career. You went into a career of more service. You're now helping others by sharing your experiences. And you're an advocate for near death experiencers in general. Do you feel like some of your purpose has been coming back to you like consciously, or do you feel like it just is flowing through you unconsciously, just coming to you? Tell me about that. Is it coming? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, are you remembering what your experience is, or is it just happening? Or not your experience, but your purpose?
Yeah, a little of both. Well, I believe we have multiple levels of purpose. Okay, if we want to just, you know, purpose is multifaceted in a lot of ways, the way we live our lives. Like I said, we have that one shared goal, right? One shared purpose of connecting with our own higher consciousness. But also we have a lot of little things that happen to us, and sometimes synchronicity kind of points us to that. Like I'm sure that till you've read something or you've talked to somebody and you've learned something new, and it's like, wow, that really is, that resonates with me. And then suddenly someone else comes along and they're looking for that information that jewel that you just received, and now you can impart that jewel onto someone else, well, that that's kind of the tree of life, the tree of knowledge is and we're a part of that, and so that those are like little purposes that come along. We're on our path, we're actually sharing what we've received, and we're giving it back in whatever ways we can. And so those little purposes come along, and a lot of times they're just synchronistic events. It's like, wow, I just learned that, and here I just learned this. Let me share it with you, that sort of thing. So, so I believe that, yeah, purpose comes to us sometimes in grand ways, but also a lot of little things, and that those are the clues that kind of point us that, well, should I go right? Should I go left? Those are the nudges that keep us centered in our path. So, so yeah, purpose is a big part of our life, but we have to be aware, and this is where awareness is key to our spiritual growth, because a lot of times we find ourselves caught up in the circumstances, right? Life is happening, stuff is going on. We're listening to this, we hear that, we integrate this, we integrate that, and sometimes we take on other people's stuff unknowingly, or it's like, or we get dragged into this mob mentality or something like that. That's the level. That level of awareness is circumstances. That's the level of circumstances. But when we rise above that and bring our awareness above the circumstances, suddenly there's a clarity, and we can see what's happening, and we can make better judgments because now we're empowered with higher awareness. And that higher level of awareness comes from our true nature, our higher self, our higher consciousness. And when we can connect with that, when we can learn to still ourselves and listen to that quiet voice, that quiet understanding, whether it comes through a voice, through visions, through just knowings, um, then we can then be more empowered when we have to deal with the circumstances, because we still are physical beings. We still got to pay the rent, and we still got to take care of business, right? But when we do it from a connection with our higher consciousness, then we're rising above the circumstances and using a higher level of awareness. And so that is a level of growth that each and every one of us can achieve in life. We
For
may
sure.
not be able to reside there all the time because circumstances likes to pull us back down, and drag us back down and knock us off center. But the thing is to recognize when we've been pulled down or pulled away or knocked off center, and take a moment to recenter, reground, you know, reconnect. Yeah.
And you were given gifts, going back to your gifts, but staying on purpose. Do you feel like those gifts were given to you to help you in your purpose? And were you given any other gifts? We talked about you could see auras and things. What other gifts were you given?
Also, well, after the cancer, I was, because part of the journey with me having the cancer was another little purpose, because I was going to then live beyond it, where I could now empathize and work with cancer survivors. And because I am a cancer survivor, right? Well, during my healing journey, I learned some healing techniques. And so I call them white light energy healing, where I can go into the light. One of my NDE mentors taught me how to go into the light and to return to the light. And so when I go and I use that technique to bring in that healing energy. And so I now do that for other people. So that's a gift that was given to me during my healing, and now I do healings for other people.
That is wonderful. Is that available on your website?
Yes, if you go to my website's dharmatalks.com, Dharma talks, Talks. .com, all one word. You'll see there's up at the top there's all the tabs of all, one talks about my cancer, one tab talks about my healings, and one talks about, I have a podcast where I talk about contemplative living, because I really believe that as we learn to be more contemplative, we tend to raise our awareness, so we connect to our higher consciousness. And so I have a weekly, it's just very short on YouTube, just very short little podcast on different elements to help us with our spiritual growth.
Wow, that's really useful, I'm sure. I think a lot of my viewers are going to check that out. And do you have any last words of wisdom for my viewers?
Yeah, I love that question, because something that I learned in my journey is that we really don't have to go searching for God or our higher connection, because it's patiently waiting for us. We have to spend the energy to learn how to listen and learn how to love through our heart in such a way that we hear that higher wisdom.
That is very beautiful, very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for sharing your story. I can't thank you enough. It's been a great honor to have you, and I've enjoyed our discussion very much.
Thank you, Tia, for having me. It's been a real privilege.